Welcome once again to the J Lowe Artist YouTube channel. Thanks for joining me on this artistic adventure. Today we'll be working with ink, pen and ink. So have your kneaded eraser, a number 2 or an HB pencil handy, and any type of ink that you would like to use. But make sure that it's archival, that it's permanent, that it's black, and a smooth ink. And let's start doing some ink drawing. First thing we want to do is we're going to do our composition, figure out where everything goes. Remember, this has got to be fairly large. Maybe this bottom corner right there, that's a good spot, and just say, well, somewhere in there, I want his feet. That would bring his back clear up into here somewhere. And there we go. So somewhere up in here, maybe his head's going to be over here. I don't want his head to be too close to that edge, so give yourself at least an inch. So if that's his head, then his body's going to be kind of up in here somewhere. His backside can go all the way to the side there. So you just kind of block him in. You want to use that whole space that's right there. There's his body for mostly. Leg's going to come down there. There's most of that front part is his legs. Got a little bit of negative space right there. That's between his legs there in the back. The rest of it's snow as it comes down. And the snow, nobody cares about the snow. I mean, it's there. We understand it. But if some of those little shadows are off, nobody cares. But if the eye is like way over here, the ear is way up there, everybody cares. So spend a little extra time to try to get that head so it's about right. That's our emphasis area. That's the part that people really care about. So I'm just going to go through and just kind of try to block that in as much as I can. Avina, do you know any trivia about polar bears? I mean, don't you? You just like them? They're very intriguing. So a couple of things about polar bears. There are few animals in this world that do not fear man. A polar bear is one of them. Polar bear will actually hunt a man for food, where most animals try to stay away from man. But polar bears are like, no, gonna eat them. That's what makes them so dangerous. In Alaska, my son used to live in Alaska, and if there were polar bears around, they kind of warn everybody, stay off the streets, avoid being out at night, that kind of thing, because the polar bear will eat you. Somebody was telling me there was a famous shipwreck. Their ship was sinking, and so they climbed onto this floating iceberg, and this polar bear kind of comes over, and every couple of days he'd stop by and pick off one of the guys and take him into the water and eat him. And there was nothing anybody could do. Those things are huge. That would be scary. Does anybody know what the other animal is that really does not fear man? Will eat man? I know that hippos kill a lot of people every year, but they don't eat them. They just chomp them and then go away. What'd you say? Do you know what the animal is?
No, I didn't say it.
Oh, you didn't? I thought you said it's a jaguar. Yeah. Jaguars don't like people. I mean, they'll try to stay away from them, but they also, when they get hungry, they will hunt them. Makes them very dangerous. So really we don't, I'm sitting here drawing probably more than I need to draw. You don't probably need to draw this much because we can always add more or less. We can always adjust it. And there's a ton of edges that we can lose in here. We can just not even draw them in. You're going to have to erase quite a bit anyway. So if your drawing starts kind of getting in your way, you just say, it's okay. I'll get rid of it. Sometimes I'll just add little guidelines like this. So once you've established your perspective and your composition, and remember your composition needs to relate to the edges of your paper or your canvas or whatever you're painting on. So this backside relates to that edge of the paper. I mean, it's so close. It's almost touching right there. I'm just going to leave a little bit of space there. But we left more space in the front. Gives him a little bit of breathing space there. And we've got enough space that we can put a base there of our snow. Then the background up in here, you don't need anything. If you wanted, I guess you could put some mountains or something back there. But hey, now it's not that big of a deal. Our composition's kind of square, and our paper's rectangular, so we have to kind of deal with that. So let's go ahead and start with our ink. I'm going to start with the head because this part's really important. When your viewer looks at your subject, they're really looking at your emphasis area. So this is our emphasis area, is our head. I'm going to zoom into that. And we're even going to zoom into our picture so we can see what's going on in there. It's a little fuzzy, but not bad. There is a little bit of light in that eye, and maybe even some reflected light over there. I don't see exactly what's going on there, but that's okay. So I'm going to start with that eye. It's a little off, so I'm just going to try to adjust it just a little bit. And just use little dots and dashes. Just little dots and dashes. And after you've kind of established where it goes, if you like where it's at, you kind of keep that going. Little dots and dashes. And just little dots and dashes. Any place that feels like it's a little gray, you can add some little dots and dashes to that. Now, here's a thing. If your animal that you're working on is very furry, fur usually goes from the center of the head out. So the fur on the left side of his head, or our right side, is going to go out this way, and the fur over here is going to go out this way. And so as I look at those little areas, I think, okay, my line has got to go that same direction. So as I move this line out, it's going to go in the same direction that his hair flows. And you can do some long ones, some short ones. Try to keep them so they're not all the same length. I always like to use a little feathered line. Little feathered line is barely touching the surface, and your ends get kind of sharp. They kind of fade away a little bit. And just little dots and dashes. Polar bear would be a good thing to do, just dots in. But that's very slow. We don't have quite that much time. This is for practice. So we want to kind of move as fast as we can. Here's some more little dots and dashes, exactly opposite his eye, at a slight angle. It's not straight up and down, it's kind of at a slight angle. On that other edge, this is his other eye. And then it gets lost. And so go ahead and lose it. Lose that edge. Don't even draw it in. Just let it go. Remember, most of those edges, you just let them go. Where his ear is, it's very dark right up there. It defines the edge of his head. So you may want to just look at it and go, okay, I'm just going to use his ear, that darkness of his ear, to define the edge of his head. And then the rest of it can just be left out. Little dots and dashes. Here's his bridge of his nose. I'm going to add just like 2, 3 little dots there, maybe 1 or 2 down here. And as you get to his nose, the darkness of his nose is going to define the rest of it. So I can just hatch through that. It's got to go fairly dark, so I'm going to hatch through that. You can use little dots and dashes to get the rest of the nose in. And if you're a little unsure, you can just put little dots around it until you're happy with it, and then you can hatch through it. It's going to go dark, so there's a lot more that we can get through in there. I'm going to skip a little, and here's his mouth. Just that little shape, that's his mouth. Skip a little bit, and up to about the corner of the eye. So if the eye comes down, straight down, that's about where the corner of the mouth comes from. So I've skipped a little bit there, because it kind of disappears. When in doubt, leave it out. You can just let it disappear. The bottom of his jaw, just like 3 or 4 little dots and dashes. Everybody knows that that's what that is. So now if I get rid of my graphite, go like this. See how that face is then defined? And all those little spaces that you leave out, your eye makes that connection. And I can always come back in and add more to it if I need to. His other ear is just kind of opposite that one. A little, almost a triangle that's kind of dark in there with little lines. Like I said, we can always add more later. Just little feathered lines. And these little lines, these little feathered lines, again, I'm trying to go in the direction that the hair flows, because they become like a little shadow of the hair. And sometimes all you need is a little dot. This would be fun to do in colored pencils. Here's something. Right here where his neck is, instead of doing line there, because you've got all this reflected light that's bouncing up in there, why don't you just do the shoulder, leave out that space, and that'll define the edge of his neck. So if I just go from that line out, do something along this line, using the shadow of his shoulder, his arm, whatever you want to call that. And if I got rid of my graphite, that defines the edge of his chin, or his neck. And I don't need to draw that in. It's already there. Just let it do its own thing. Okay, what color is a polar bear's skin? If you were to shave that polar bear bald, what color would his skin be? Does anybody know? Anybody want to guess? What? Black, yeah. He's a living solar collector. His fur is not white. His fur is clear. It's like a fishing line. It looks white because all that light, remember, light is white. It's all the colors mixed together, but it becomes white. And so all that light is energy, and it goes into his fur, which goes down into the blackness of his skin and makes him warm. So he's black. Isn't that crazy? He's a natural solar collector. Anybody want to guess how thick the pads of his feet are? His little insulated feet are about 2 inches thick. It's like 2 inches of rubber. It keeps him from freezing. Polar bears are so cool. So again, we have not drawn a line, a continuous line around anything, but everything kind of helps just define itself. Now I got to go back into his nose because his nose isn't white like that. So I'm just going to use little dots and dashes. And you don't need much. Like I say, when in doubt, you may want to just leave it out. But little dots, it's amazing what a little dot will do. So here in his nose, you can do a little more cross-hatching or some dots and dashes. Whatever you feel like you need to define that a little bit, because it's very dark. So in this gray area, I'm just little dots just to define it a little bit, just make it a little grayer, a little darker. The closer the dots are, the darker the value. Kind of looks like he's smiling. Probably thinking about lunch. Polar bear's favorite snack? Baby seals. If you try this technique where I'm barely touching the paper and you drag your pen across fairly quick, but you're just barely touching it, you get this kind of broken, feathery, very soft line. The edge of his ear, I'm going to define that by the fur that's behind it. Hopefully, we'll get the edge of his ear kind of coming through right there. So when we get rid of our graphite, the edge of his ear is already defined because it's all white anyway. Even the top of his head, the only way it's defined is you can see what's beyond it. So you may not want to draw that in. You may want to just have a couple little dots and dashes. Don't be afraid to leave it out. Large stretches of that, just leave it out. So again, if I get rid of my graphite, that edge, everybody knows it's there. You've defined it, but it's broken. Leave it out. No reason to have it in there. Again, I'm trying to define some of those little soft, fuzzy areas. The other thing is when we get down to his paws, those are going to be a little on the dark side, and they'll compete a little bit with his face, and that's okay. We'll figure this out. Any place that is a little dark, go ahead and just throw that in. Remember, the closer your lines are together, the darker that shape becomes. So if you want some that are a little bit darker, just put a couple little slashy lines together. They'll darken it up. Leave your lines broken so they look like fur. I'd imagine a polar bear's fur is quite soft. I like it when I can get rid of the graphite. This graphite just kind of starts to get in the way. These are those feathered lines. Remember, don't go in the same direction all the time. Flip one up or flip one down, or have a short one or a long one, so that it evens. It makes them so they're not as even, because fur doesn't grow evenly. And you can always come back in and add more. So start out with less. I have no idea what's going on in those palms or in his little feet. So I'm just going to try to get in the little dark areas, scribble in some darkness. And just let them take care of themselves. his back, this little light part that comes around his shoulder, is defined not by the light part, but by the darker part on his backside. So just draw that, leave out his shoulder, and you got it. His backside is really, really light. You may want to just leave some out. Just leave it out. Skip a little bit. A couple little dots and dashes. So that backside isn't even defined. It's gone. Everybody knows it's there. I mean, just those little dots and dashes, that's enough. And if later on you say, I need more, you can always come back in and add more. So I'm just scribbling in the little shapes of darkness. They're on his paws. I have no idea what's going on in there. Just little dots and dashes to figure that out. I can go back in and do more on him, and I know I need to, because some of this is not as white as it looks, but I want to get to the snow, especially this little shadow underneath him. Rather than try and draw a line around it and everything, you can just kind of go into it and just do little hatched lines. Just say, okay, I see that shadow. It's right there. I'm just going to hatch into that. Here's some shadow that comes down here, meets up with his little paw over here. And that's all you need are those little hatched lines. Less hatched line if it's lighter, more hatched line if it's a little darker. And then you think, oh, well, okay, I see some of this snow kind of coming down in there. I need something there. I'm just going to do these little hatched lines. Here's some other snow. And they can just be hanging out there. They're not even attached to anything. They're just hanging out there, but your eye makes a connection. It says, oh yeah, I see that, how it's kind of comes together. I think my graphite's just about gone here. I'm going to get rid of everything. All that graphite's got to be gone. And no one will ever know that I sketched it on with my pencil first. Graphite's gone. Now I can go in and just a little bit of more line. I'm trying not to even push the paper against the desk. Just barely dragging the pen across the surface. You'll get this really tight little thin line. So nice. This is a great lesson on what to leave out. So much that we can leave out. The other thing is, after you've drawn a little bit on it, you stop and you go, oh, wait a minute, that's not enough. When you first lay it down, you think, oh, that's plenty. And then you're like, no, it's not enough. So you have to go back into it, add a little bit more. The little lines on his back can be much longer than those on his head. Remember to keep it nice and light, thin. You still have to have your form. You still have to give enough information that your viewer knows what it is. Ink drawing can be very therapeutic as well, because it's all about textures and using line to create values. A good place for a signature be right down there in the snow somewhere. Don't put it right on the edge. Remember, your signature is part of your composition. Where you put it does matter. I don't know if you noticed what I was doing here, though. I felt like the shoulder was a little narrow up here, so I moved it out a little bit. Had I drawn a line there, I couldn't have done that. I'd be stuck with that line. But here, I can move it. I can keep bringing it out until I'm happy with where it's at. That's why you want to avoid drawing lines around things. So when I first laid it in, it was dark enough, and now I'm like, I got to go back into it. Just is what it is. But just keep going back in, but don't overdo it. And how do you know? That's a good question. My illustrating professor used to tell me the difference between a good artist and a beginner is the professional knows when to stop. I suppose you can do little dots in the snow too, but that just seems like a lot of dots. One of these days I'll show you how to do water Maybe on Wednesday I'll try to pick something that has water. Water is so easy to do. Even frothy water, because you know water comes, when you agitate water, it turns white. So rather than draw the water, you draw everything around it and in between. And then you got it. No, sounds easy. And it kind of is, but polar bears look so cuddly. They're kind of like Yellowstone bison. They look cuddly, they look fluffy, but they will kill you. Yeah, about right up in there is a good place for a signature. I enjoyed this today. Thanks for drawing with me. Hopefully you enjoyed it too. Hopefully you learned something. And hopefully it made your life just a little nicer